much warehouse space will we be needing in the coming years and where? Melinda McLaughlin is Vice President and General Head of Research with Prologis. Hello, Melinda.
Hi, Robert. Pleased to be here.
So what is your view of the current picture in the United States with regard to the supply of warehouse space now and say for the next 5 years?
Well, in short, it's not enough. Today, vacancy rates still remain under 5%, and in some markets that can be under 3%. Entering 2021, the construction pipeline had expanded to more than 300 million square feet, but it's since come down. There are fewer projects breaking ground in the second and third quarters as COVID took hold. So spec starts on the whole were down 10% year to date in 2020, although build-to-suit activity did remain strong. That was another sign that customers couldn't find enough space to fit their needs. Looking ahead, no, go ahead.
Well, I just want to, before you get to the future part, I just want to ask you, is any aspect of the picture that you saw in 2020 specific to 2020, buildup of inventories based on store closures, the things like that, that might be relieved when the virus subsides, or did you see actual things that are going to be actual conditions that are going to be more permanent?
So on the supply side, there was the temporary decrease where you simply could not bring buildings on fast enough, as well as, obviously a heightened risk perception related to COVID. But on the demand side, which is I think what you're asking about, the pandemic really just accelerated trends that already existed. Inventory builds was something we saw with trade tensions. So the more volatility you have in your supply chain and kind of the less reliably you can count on that just-in-time movement of goods, the more customers tend to hold within a country's borders in order to meet consumer demands. The pandemic was just probably the most extreme version of that. So that is likely to persist for quite some time. I do think we've learned a lesson about just-in-time inventories, and it'll be something that companies consider in their risk management in the future. E-commerce was another one where, again, obviously very fast growing prior to the pandemic. The unique nature of the lockdown period certainly put that on fast forward, but consumers were already buying more and more online as a share of their overall spending due to convenience benefits, choice benefits, and obviously programs that allowed them to get their goods more quickly. And so that is something where, although I do think there will be, probably a little bit of a snapback when people have more options available, it's something that we expected e-commerce to, continue to gain market share over 5 years. It all really happened in 2020 and is likely to stay there.
I believe you are saying that e-commerce or e-fulfillment footprints must double in size to handle anticipated demand, right?
Absolutely. We've been studying this for some time, and e-commerce just requires a lot more logistics space. When you think about it, it doesn't have the benefit of storing inventory on store shelves. 100% of your inventory is in the warehouse. Additionally, you go on a website, there's a lot more choice, variety of goods, so they do stock a broader inventory and deeper inventory levels. With a broader catchment area than a single store, you do need to have deeper inventory levels to satisfy, potentially volatile demand. And a lot of these facilities incorporate value add space, whether it's returns, assembly, white glove service, things like that.
When I think of an e-commerce fulfillment center today, and when many others think of it too, they think of the massive Amazon style facilities that have been popping up all over the place in the last decade or so, last 20 years even. Is that what we're going to be looking at in the future, or are there going to be different flavors of e-fulfillment warehouses, or for that matter, any type of warehouses that appear in the next 5 years?
It's a great question. I do think this is maybe a common misperception. First of all, the logistics universe of customers is incredibly diverse, and e-commerce represents still only a small share of all the warehouses in the US, roughly 15%. For Amazon specifically, they certainly have a model and a lot of technology and a size that they're going for that I do think captures a little bit more media attention. But both on the retailing side as well as even the e-fulfillment side, there is a range of models, building sizes, the level of automation, how they run their facilities. So we've studied, again, within our portfolio, which is pretty large at this point, We've studied the look and feel and features of e-commerce facilities and compared them to the overall portfolio, non-e-commerce. Again, it's a bigger part of the portfolio. And I think what might be surprising is that they do look fairly similar. There's a wide range of sizes, from very small units to those million square foot plus buildings that are highly automated. They were built over, kind of a similar range of time. So some are older, some are newer. And, this is a space that just continues to evolve. So I think we hear a lot more about, micro fulfillment, highly automated but smaller facilities. So I think we'll continue to see, new models crop up as the industry grows, scales, incorporates new technology. It's quite an exciting time.
Now, we also think about the assumption that in e-commerce, the demand for service and turnaround and order fulfillment is so much heavier now with the e-tailing consumer. Does that mean that these e-commerce facilities will, by definition, be highly automated?
Not by definition. I think there's a lot of ways, again, to run a business, and we see an incredible diversity inside our facilities. But the payoff from automating does tend to be larger. And it's because you're doing this very space intensive, very labor intensive pick, pack, ship operation. And generally, when customers incorporate automation into their operations, it's to improve labor productivity. It's not, about density. It is about making the most of the people in your buildings, making sure they're most productive, taking anything that's repetitive, not a good use of time, automating it so they can focus on that real value add. Mm-hmm. So for e-commerce, not only is it more space intensive than your traditional brick and mortar retailer operation, but it's roughly 3 times as labor intensive than a traditional logistics operation.
Wow.
Because of that type of that type of business where you're really doing that individual parcel shipping operation.
And when the economy recovers in the post-pandemic era, the thinking is that we might get back to the state it was in before, where we had very, very low unemployment. So does automation become a necessity, not just a luxury to improve productivity in a facility, but an absolute necessity because so many facilities can't even find enough human bodies?
Yeah, this is something we heard in the lead up to the pandemic. Labor was the number one pain point of customers for years and years. Low unemployment, very difficult to find. With the growth of e-commerce and the labor intensity of e-commerce, it became even more competitive to find, human capital. And so as we look forward, that's going to be one of those critical shortages that's going to constrain some customers from really being able to adapt to the supply chain of the future. I think it will be a necessity for many, especially in areas where you see very low unemployment, high competition for space. But one thing I would like to correct is, even though, obviously unemployment rates have come up prior to the pandemic, we have heard labor has become even more challenging for logistics operators to find during this crisis. Again, it's that need to really adapt to very quickly changing consumer preferences and a new model of business while maintaining safety and obviously making sure workers are safe. But it has become even harder in 2020 than it was in 2019, in spite of what might have happened with the unemployment rate.
Another trend we've seen just recently is the placement of large distribution centers in urban areas as opposed to suburban or rural or exurban or something like that, because of the demands of e-commerce and the need to be close to the customer. Will we continue to see that? And what problems might arise in terms of congestion and traffic and all that kind of stuff, and plopping a million square foot facility in the middle of a major urban center?
Well, for one thing, I don't think we're going to see any million square footers. I think finding that kind of land in a major market is a pretty tall order, but I do think we will continue to see more urban facilities. And, when you think about ordering behavior and consumers, they're ordering e-fulfillment packages, whether or not there's an urban fulfillment center nearby. So the traffic and congestion, when you have those packages coming from outside the urban area and then coming in, is actually greater than if you were to have one large vehicle bring those packages into an urban fulfillment center. Then, offload and kind of get them all into their individual vans, which are now making much shorter trips because they are closer to consumers. I do think it's something where, yes, if everybody stopped shopping online, because there was no urban fulfillment centers, we wouldn't see those delivery vans that are probably pretty prevalent in your neighborhood today. However, that's very unlikely to happen. And the incorporation of urban fulfillment actually helps solve or minimize the congestion problem, as well as obviously improve efficiency of those operations. So this is all about, consolidation, economies of scale, getting those goods as far along on the supply chain in a consolidated way before breaking it down and getting it to your doorstep in a hopefully very short amount of time.
To what extent will these new facilities be actually repurposed shopping malls and retail stores, which become dark stores and the like? We're hearing a lot about that. Is that going to be a continuing trend?
Dark stores, I do think, are an experimental model and in many cases not quite proven yet. So I'm not sure. I think that there's certainly some reasons to think they'll continue to take hold, and then others where it's very challenging. But the retail to industrial conversion equation, we've written an entire paper about that, and you can find it on the website, really sizing the market. And when you think about the type of retail that would be well suited for this direct to consumer delivery, it is most likely the type of retail that is already thriving. The retail that's struggling does tend to be further away from those dense pockets of consumption that these last mile, last touch fulfillment players, they want to be near those consumers the same way that a physical retail presence would want to be near those consumers. So there's not a lot of overlap. But that said, when there is a project that is well suited, it's in a good area, we are seeing rents for logistics facilities, because they're now serving this dual function of both distribution and kind of retail fulfillment. We are seeing rents rise, and it is starting to make more and more sense in those cases. But I would say they're more of the exception than the rule.
Yeah. And we get back to automation in order to keep the cost down at a time like that too.
Yeah.
Melinda McLaughlin of Prologis, thanks for that snapshot of what we need. And the answer is a lot in terms of warehouse space coming up, especially e-fulfillment. I want to thank you so much for being with me today. Appreciate it.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be here.